All right, guys. Good morning.
Good morning, sir.
I hope you can hear me. Yeah. Good morning, everybody.
Good morning, sir.
Yeah. All right. So I joined in the conversation late, and yeah. So I understand the concerns that you guys have, and I'm glad that she has been able to answer the questions that you have. But at the end of today's class, you're going to get an assignment. So for those that have been looking for engagement, it's about time. So let's see how that goes. All right. So today we're going to create an API. All right. So create a joke API. So this is how the API is going to work. All right. The API is going to be able to serve jokes, all right, to the user. So we'll be able to read jokes. We'll be able to read jokes. We'll be able to write to jokes. So do the CRUD operations, right? So you write the jokes, read the jokes, update, and then delete, all right, a joke. So first of all, we're going to do it making use of an array, all right? And then after that, we're going to try to do the same things, making use of file, all right? So we're going to use an array first as our storage, and then we're going to make use of a file as our storage, okay? So let's see how that would work out. So I'm going to share my screen now. Okay, so I believe my screen should be up. Okay. So when we start using files, we're going to be making use of the NodeJS documentation, all right, for dealing with files, okay? But for now, this is just what we have in the project. This is our database, and then this is the jokes database. So we're using our file as a database, okay? But when you start writing real world applications, you're going to be using the proper database. But this is just to ensure that you know how to interact with files, basically. Okay. So let's start. Currently, this is not a Node project, and who can tell me how or why, or how can you identify whether a project is a Node project or not? Is there anybody? Anybody wants to try?
I think it will have server or something.
Okay, yeah, so that's not really, because if I just had server.js now, it still doesn't make it a Node project.
Do we need to initialize npm?
Sorry, sir?
Do we need to initialize npm?
Sorry, I didn't get you clearly.
So do we need to initialize npm?
Okay, that's a smart one. You're asking me the question so that I'll answer the question myself. All right, so somebody said package.json. That is correct. All right. That is correct, because we need a package.json file for every Node project, right? And not just a package.json file. Yeah, use of Node packages. So not just a package.json file, a package.json file that is properly configured. All right, but then basically from a high level, when you see a project and you see package.json, most times, okay, most times, let's leave room for exceptions. All right, most times it's going to be a Node project. For you to be very, very sure, most times you are going to see a Node modules folder. All right, going to see a Node modules folder. Please help me mute your mic in case your mic is off. Please help me mute it. All right, so you can write your basic codes. You You could call them bootstrap for your project, right? You can write your basic codes before you even initiate your project as a node project, or you can do it from the start, right? But then we already have our folder. It's called jokes API, and that is the folder open right here in our terminal. All right. So if you check the terminal, you'll see that we have jokes API open. So let me zoom in a bit. All right. So we have jokes API open. ls is a command that helps you list the contents of your directory. All right. So what I'm going to do now to make this a node project is to run npm init. I'm going to say --y. --y means accept all default configurations. Okay. So once I do that, you see that it's that command wrote to a file called package.json, and this is the content that was written into it. All right. So if we do ls again, you see that we now have our package.json file. All right. So now let's go into the package.json file. I think this is the command, if I recall. All right. So this is our package.json file, but it's opening out of VS Code, and that's not what we want. Okay. So what I'm going to do is try another command, because sometimes you forget this command. So let's just do package.json and see what happens. Okay, doesn't work. So I'll check what the command is again. So you could do I think command P, right, and then search for your files. So we have package.json here. Okay. So instead of opening and closing this panel, you can just say command P or control P on your computer and search for your file. All right. So we have opened our package.json. Let's see the content of it. So we have the name and all the stuff we went through the last time. And then our main file, which is the entry point, is server.js. All right. And for us to run that file, we'll do node server.js. Okay. So currently there's nothing in the file. So if I say node server.js, you see that nothing happens. But if I write something in there, all right, and run, you see that indeed that file is being read. Okay. So what we'll do is instead of writing node server.js, we'll just run npm start. So every script you see here, every of the keys on that script, all right, you can run them using npm run, then the name of that particular script. If you want to run test, you do test. If you want to run start, you do start. All right. But then there are some default script that npm recognizes. So to run those scripts, you don't need to add the run keyword. You just say npm and the script. So test and start are some of those. All right. So I could just say npm start and it will start. All right. So my project has run. All right. But now this is not a proper server yet. Okay. So let's make it a proper server. We could do that by making use of the HTTP module. All right, so say const HTTP, all right, equals require HTTP. Okay, so there are two different modules. There's HTTP and there's HTTPS. All right, so we could use either of them. Okay, but because I am developing locally, all right, at this point, I'm just going to make use of HTTP. Okay, but let's see, maybe somewhere along the line in the course we can make use of the HTTPS. But it's very important to state that both of them are almost identical, right? So if I start making use of, for instance, let's create a server. So to create a server, I say server equals HTTP dot create server, right? And I create a server, and then of course request response, okay, passing a callback. And I've created a server. If I at some point want to change this to HTTPS, all right, I just need to search for all the HTTPs and change them to HTTPS, and everything works. Create server still exists inside HTTPS, all right? So yeah. So basically you won't have to do much, all right, to get your server running on HTTPS. And if you want to even make it easier, you can just destructure directly. All right, you destructure directly from here and then just use create server. So maybe in the future you want to change to HTTPS, you just say HTTPS and everything should still work, fine. All right. So I'm going to use HTTP for now. So this is our server. Our server has been created, but then we need to start the server. All right. So there's creating the server, and then there's also starting the server. So a lot of times people get confused between what it means to create a server and what it means to start a server. All right. So these are how servers work. The servers make use of what we call the event emitter. All right. It's a feature of Node.js. Okay. So what that does is that you can listen to events and then you can act based on the events. Okay. So creating a server is like, I don't know if you ever had experience with software engineering, no, not software engineering, like computer engineering, where you have to put parts together. You get your motherboard, you plug your hard disk and plug everything together and then create, so they call it cloning. You clone a computer yourself and then everything runs. All right. So that's what creating a server is like. All right. It's like putting all the plugs and ensuring everything is properly connected together to make a system that can be used. After doing that, you now have to push the button. You have to turn on the button. All right. Turning on the button is what we do with server.listen. Okay. That's what we do with server.listen. And then server.listen makes it active, and then it actively listens for requests. Without server.listen, you have a server, but then the server is not listening for requests. It means that you cannot interact with the server. All right. So it's listening for requests, but then server.listen is not complete without your callback. So you have to specify a callback. I think it's a port, then a callback. Yeah. If I point on this, it tells us more the port and the callback. So let's see. Let's try that. So we're going to do 3000 and then put our callback here. Says console.log server running. Okay. So ports, for lack of words now, ports are like they're like rooms in a house. So you have a server and then you have many rooms. So when somebody comes to your server, the server is going to be listening on port 3000, right? So when somebody comes to your house, they know their direct address they are going to, like the direct room they are going to. Your address is 127.0.0.1, but then you need a port, right? You need like a direct, where do I go in that? So it's like an office address. When you get there, there's a department, all right, that you need to go to directly. So that's the port. That's what port does for you. All right. So it's another form of address system when dealing with servers. All right. So I'm going to let's do local host and let's try it if I've done something good. So okay, so we're not handling our requests at this point, all right, but then we have our server running. So let's run the server and see if our server is truly running. All right, so I'm going to do npm start to start the server, and then you see that our server is running. All right, so we now have a server running, and if I do this again, it's going to keep loading. So if you notice, I don't know if I zoom in, you'll see, no, it doesn't zoom that area. So if you check the top, you see that it's loading. Check this, you see that it keeps loading because there's nothing handling the request. All right, we have a handler, but we're not doing anything inside of that handler. Okay, So you need to handle the request. So when somebody comes to the room, what do you do? You understand? The handler is not like it's not like the person. It could be a receptionist, it could be anybody who receives, that visitor that is coming to your specific address. All right. So that's the request handler. So now I have the request handler. The request handler cannot just sit and be looking at, the visitor, right? The request handler has to do something. All right. He has to welcome the visitor or just, do something. So how do we respond to this particular user? So we could do something like, and just say rest the end, which is response, right? I'm making a response. I'm responding to the particular request. So you can just rest the end, like just end the request. Or you might decide to actually send something to the user. So for us, it's going to be a JSON response, all right? So we're going to do JSON.stringify, right? To send a JSON response. And then we'll say message connection alive, right? So let's just do that. So when somebody visits our server, they should get a response that says connection alive. So let's see, what have I done wrongly? Let's see. So create server, the server handler, listen for requests. Okay, so quickly we're just gonna do node, all right, instead of debugging. So we have our server, create server, we're responding to the request. All right, we're doing everything right. Okay, so let me try something. I'm gonna get rid of this. Okay, 3,000 running. Right. All right, so correct. So the issue was our local host. We should have used the IP as you see here. All right, but then you can, if you ignore it, it's going to be this by default. Okay, so that is it. All right, so you see now that we have a response here that says message, all right, and then connection alive. That's the response. All right. So just to go over this again for those who are very new to Node.js, you have to create your server. All right. And then when creating the server, you need to specify who handles what. So it's like going back to the analogy of cloning a computer, right? If I try to make a network request now, my CPU receives the request and delegates that particular operation to my network card. All right. So it's not like my CPU does everything. My CPU receives the request, gives it over to my network card because it's a network request. And then network card processes the request, gets the response, and give it back to the CPU. CPU gives it back to whoever requested for it. Now, if you try to interact with gaming functionalities, the CPU is going to receive the request, and then it will route it to your graphic card. All right, it does all the heavy work. You get, then the CPU just is like the middleman. All right, so different parts of your computer respond to different things. It's not like your CPU is the guy processing every single thing. There are things that it sends to the hard disk. Somebody needs this from you. The hard disk process and gives it back the response, and then it responds back to the caller. All right. So in that case, we're creating a server. So when we say server, you should think about something that exists somewhere. So when we're creating a server, is a computer that we're building. We're building a computer in that sense. All right. So we have to say when somebody, so listen for requests on this port, right? And when somebody visits that port, there should be a handler in my server, all right, that's going to handle the request. So I've been calling this guy handler since, but we can make it very, very clear. So I could do something like this, const request handler, okay, equals this, so that it becomes very clear to you. And then we refer to the request handler. Okay, so if I do this, I'll have to restart my server because there's a new change. I say npm start, and if we refresh, you see that everything still works. All right, back to JavaScript basics. A function is a value that you can pass around. That's why we can pass request handler. We're just referring to it, okay, just to make it look easier. All right, so you see that we now have a handler. So we say anytime somebody visits this server, all right, this guy should be the one handling the request. And in this case, we are saying that for every request that you receive, just say connection alive. No matter what the request is, just say connection alive. All right. If you say user, will say connection alive. User one will say connection alive. All right. But then you will quickly realize that that's no server, like that's not doing anything. So how do we now handle requests based on the route and then based on the method? So we're going to first talk about the route. So how do we handle requests based on routes? So to handle requests based on routes, you have to get the information from the request. So let's do console.log req for our request. All right. But at this point, I'm tired of restarting my server and starting it again every time, stopping and restarting my server every time we make a change. So I'm going to install a node module. Remember, we spoke about external packages, right? I'm going to install an external package called NodeMon. I think I explained it during the last class. So npm NodeMon. So for node monitor, all right, it's going to be npm install NodeMon. Okay. There you go. It has been
Looks
installed.
like no demon.
So notice that immediately I install that package, we now have a node modules folder. All right. So if you check your package.json now, you should see amongst your dependencies, you should see NodeMon. All right. So I'm going to save that. And now if I start my server, npm start, before I do that, I'm going to update this to use NodeMon instead of Node. And then I start my server. So you see that NodeMon is now starting my server for me. All right. So go back to server. I could even get rid of this because we already have messages coming from NodeMon. So I might not need to run this, but I'm just going to leave it there. All right. Just for decoration. Okay. So let's see. So where are we? We're trying to get the request, all right, information concerning the request. So if I make a request now and go back to my terminal, you know that we are logging the request. Okay, so let's check for that information. So what we are looking for is URL. There's something called URL that we're looking for. All right, just want to show you that it's here. It's not coming from somewhere magical. But if we cannot find it, so this is a URL, but this is favicon ICO. All right. So, but then let's see. Let's do req.url. All right. So if we try to run the request again, we're gonna see that we have two URLs. It's favicon.ico. What the? Where are you coming from? All right, so let's not use the browser to avoid multiple requests. So let's make use of something called Thunder Client. All right, Thunder Client is an extension in VS Code that we can use to make API requests. All right, so I don't want to use the browser for now so that we get the hang of the main explanations and interactions. Browsers come with their own extra packages, so let's avoid that. All right. So what I'm going to do now is make a request, a new request. I'm going to say HTTP localhost / 30,000, right? So let's try, and then you see we have connection alive. But if you check now, what's up? So let's go back to our server and see. I want to clear my terminal because I don't know what's happening here. So let's clear the terminal. All right, so let's npm start. So we shouldn't see that favicon request anymore. So let's run this now. And you see that we have just /. Okay, so that's the URL. That's like saying that the request was made on the home route. So I don't need this browser again anymore. So it's like saying that the request was made on the home route. So if I do another / and say user, you're going to see that we have /user. All right. So without any extra parts to the URL, you would be making a request to just the /. All right. That's like the home directory in a sense. But then if you add stuff to it, like this, you'll see that the URL is going to change. Okay. So now what can we do in our server? So we will say that if somebody is trying to access just the home route, do you get? Somebody is trying to access just the home route, we want to do something different. We are trying to access another kind of route, we want to do something different. So let's just try. Let's do if, all right, request.url is equal to just /, right? What we want to do is to rest.end. All right, let's just end the request by giving them an empty array of object. We don't have jokes at this point, right? So let's just give them an empty object. All right. So let's try that and see if it will work. So we come back here and just hit the home route. You will see that we get an empty object, the response of 200. All right, because our request was successful. So let's see. Unhandled error. Where did that error come from? All right. Where did that error come from? Let's make another request and see what's up. Okay. There's an error. Let's go back to our server file and see what's there. So I'm going to get rid of this guy. Okay, I'm going to get rid of that guy. And we're going to run our file again. So if I send, there's no error anymore. Our server is still running and we get our response. All right. So there you go. When we talk about error handling, we'll talk about some of those errors. But for now, I'm going to just ignore some of those. Thunder client, behave yourself. All right, so this is our response. Okay. So we could also say that if you are trying to access /users, all right, if URL is equal to /users, what we want to do is to respond with, so we're using this to get all the users, right? So let's use this to test the endpoint. So let's just say API working. All right, so let's just say message API running. All right, let's just use that for that. Then /users is going to return all the users. And that is most likely going to be an array of objects. So let's do an empty array for now. And then, so we're doing jokes. Let's do jokes, right? Okay, so it's going to return an empty array for now. Okay, and then let's test it. So we go to our Thunder client. In case this is your first time hearing of Thunder client, you go to extensions, you click on extensions, and then check for Thunder client. All right, so this is standard client. Just click on it and you should install. Okay. So back to our code. Okay. Okay. Back to our code, we're going to do /jokes. All right, and enter. So you see that we get our array, our empty array. Okay. So our routes are working well now. All right, but then you would discover that there are different methods when interacting with servers. There are different methods that you make use of. So there's the get, which is what I've been making use of all this while. There's the patch, all right? There's post, and then there is delete. Okay, so patch or put. All right, these guys, they almost do the same thing. All right, but let's do patch for now. So we have these guys. Okay, and all these guys, they correspond to something called CRUD, which is create, all right, read. Create is going to be post, so let me put them in the same order. All right, so create, read, update, and delete. Okay, so post is to create a new resource, all right, to add a new resource to the server. Get is to fetch resources from the server. Patch is to update a resource, all right, on the server. And delete is to delete a resource from the server. Okay, that's when you hear CRUD. All right, when you hear CRUD operations, it means that it's going to be centered around creating, reading, updating, and deleting. So there are some applications that you work on. This is all just what they would do. For instance, if you have a library, so you are creating an API for a library, what are the possible operations that can happen, in a library? Maybe you want to retrieve a book. That would be to get, all right? You want to read a book, right? That would be to that's retrieve, sorry. Then you want to create a book, okay? That would be to create a new maybe categories for books, okay? And then you want to update, you update that particular category, or you can even create a new book in the library. All right, that's like adding a book to the library. That will be create. All right, and then you want to update. All right, you can update some properties of the book, like the book metadata, the author of the book. Maybe you spelled it wrongly, you want to spell it correctly, you can do that. You understand? So any update functionality, right, you use update. And you want to delete, simple delete. All right, so that is it. So currently what I've been doing is that I've been listening for just the URL, or I've been checking for just the URL. All right, and in reality that's not what we do, because when somebody calls a URL, somebody hits an endpoint and the method is a get method, we ought to know that that is for retrieval. When somebody hits that same URL and then the method associated with it is a post method, what we are supposed to know that the person is trying to create a resource. All right, so what we're going to do now is to try that. All right, so currently, if we go back to Thunder client and change our method, so you can see that there are many more methods, but you might not even make use of them, because personally I've not made use of a lot of these other methods. Okay, so they are there, they are useful, but those are not stuff that you use for basic operations. Okay, so if I change this to post, right, and then hit the jokes endpoint, I still get an empty array. All right, if I change it to just our home endpoint and I hit it, I still get message API running. All right, even though this is a post. If I change it to put, it will still be the same thing. All right, the reason is because in our server currently, we are only checking for the URL. We're not concerned about the method. All right, so irrespective of the method, when you hit this URL, which is the home route, we want to give you this response. That's what we're doing currently, okay? But then we could do better. So we could say that if this is a call to the home route, and the request dot method, all right, is equal to get. Then we want to return this. All right, so that is it. Okay, so what we're going to do now is this. We're going to say else if, right? So we want to connect all of them together. Else if, and then we'll say else. So in case the request does not match any of the above conditions, we want to handle it in the end, all right? And we'll say not found. All right, so we'll say response, all right, not found. Let's do message not found. Okay, so now let's try. If we come here, and so these are gets, right? So let's do and request the method equals to get. Let's do get to, all right? So let's try again. So now that we're using put, it's no longer get, right? But we'll see that we get the not found response because there's no condition currently handling put request. So if we want to handle a put request, we'll now have to add a new condition now. All right. So now we'll say if it is slash jokes and then it's a put. All right. We want to say putting successful. All right. So if we try again here and try put request, you see that you get putting successful. All right. This is how you build your server in a nutshell. Now, I'm sure that for some of us, we can already see that this is going to be problematic because what in the world are we doing? You know, we have to write if statements for every possible route. Okay. It's going to be very, very difficult to manage. All right. That's why we have something like express.js. It makes creating all of these routes easier. All right. A lot of these operations that seem very painful will be easier with express.js. But I think we need to really understand what's happening behind the scene because I can create my own version of express.js currently, right? I can sit down and say, I want to recreate express.js, and I would. It will be painful, it take time, maybe take me up to 4 months because express.js is already out there. So I can look at their documentation and see how they handled everything and then try to recreate it. Maybe 4 or 6 months, I'll create Express again. But I wouldn't be able to do that if I don't understand how this core core module works. Do you understand? So you have to understand the basics. That's why we spend time in JavaScript, so that now that we're making use of callbacks, some of you will be able to understand because there are people, there are persons who they had previous understanding of this concept before they came to, you know. So we have to consider everybody, right? So we took time to explain callbacks and a lot of the concepts that we're going to be using in Node.js. In that same way, if we just jump to Express.js, all right, a lot of you are not going to understand. You just think that, oh, the only thing you can do is Express.js. And if you say it, maybe you go to a dev conference or something like that, you make a statement out of ignorance. Maybe you might have been working with Node.js for like 2 years and you feel like it's just Express.js that you used to create a server. You can't create a server with anything else because you were not taught. All right. And perhaps maybe you did not research. All right. So we decided to make sure that everybody knows what's happening, at least to a good extent, behind the scene. All right. And then so that you know that when you start using Express, you appreciate what Express is doing, and you can tell what is going on behind the scene in your mind. You can tell what's going on behind the scene. Okay, so we're going to keep using HTTP to create more complex functionalities for our server. All right. So this is just us trying to test HTTP. So now that we had not found, okay, there's something called response or status code. There's something called status code. So if you check, you see this status 200, they all have meanings. All right. So if we come here and say HTTP status codes, all right, you will see that we have different status codes. The error code What is error code? 200. 200 is not error code. So let's leave those guys. They might not know what they're saying because not everybody on Google know what they're saying. Okay, so you can go to MDN docs, always reliable. So you see what it says now. Informational responses would fall between 100 to 199, all right? And they have their meaning. They'll fall between 100 to 199 and they have their meaning. Successful responses will fall between 200 to 299, inclusive of both numbers. Then redirection messages will fall between 300. So you see anything 300, it's talking about redirect. If you see anything 200, it's talking about a successful response. If you see anything 100, it's trying to give you an information. If you see anything 400, it's an error. If you also see, but that's going to be client error. If you see anything 500, that error has to do with the server. All right, that's why a developer can easily say that's not a front-end issue. Contact the back-end guys because of the status message you are seeing, you know that error is coming from the server. All right, and it's not from your end. So it's very important to understand status codes and know the right status code to send to your client. Okay, so here to adjust the status code, it's just giving so it's just giving put. I think we gave the wrong response there. So we could have done this. We could have done this. Okay. And here is gonna be server not found, right? So to give the right response for not found errors, all right, what we could do is to say right head, all right? So all these are called headers, all right? So I want to write to the header. So rest.write head, okay? And that will be 404. I know that a lot of us, we can relate to 404, all right? So you do that with servers also. So if I go back and if I come here and try to put here, you see not found, and then you see that it's a 404, not found. I did not say not found. I just said 404. But then because these codes are standard, it's not like I met developers that just throw these codes around. It's a very funny thing to encounter. People just throw the codes around, put any code there, right? But these codes, they have meaning, all right, because they are standard codes. All right, so if I say 201, just watch now. Let me just say 201. 201 is not appropriate for this, but I just want to show you how it will look. So if I change it to 201 and then make that request again, you're going to see 201 created. Did I say created? No. All right, but because it's a standard code, right? Standard client knows how to interpret, what it means. All right, so 201 means that you created a resource or you added a resource to the server. All right, so we're going to delete all these and go back to a clean slate. All right, the request and response objects are very powerful and you can do a lot of things with them. All right, so let's try to work with our database. So I'm going to create a database variable, DB variable, and the content of it is going to be from jokes.js. Okay, so we can decide to export this. Okay, and let's see if I've done well. So I'm going to require so db jokes.js. So let's see if that's console.log db and get our terminal. Okay, so db is looking like an empty object. So let's see. We're going to do module.exports. So where's our module that exports? Yes, okay. So there you go. We now have our array. Okay. So the DB here is currently getting our array. All right. You see that now I am now constrained, right? Because there are a lot of persons contesting or protesting that, oh, we are too slow, we are too this, we are too that. The thing is that even those persons protesting, I assure you that there are some things they need to know that they don't know, but they think they know, right? Because they have had a little experience, with one thing or the other. But there are some things they need to know. If I ask some of them, how does require work? They don't know. But they know that you can just require and just use it, but they don't know how require works. All right. But there's an advantage. If you know how require works, you know how many of these things work. You can even decide one day to just go solo and create your own whatever. All right. So I'm putting all the advantages out there when I try to explain things in details. All right. And then you see that we don't have enough time and people start saying, oh, it seems slow, it seems that. Okay, but we're going to just run. All right. So you know that when you require, you can export, right? You can do modular export and then get whatever you exported. There are a lot of things to explain in there, but we don't have the time to do that. All right, so we have our file here, and it's an array at this point. So what we want to do isn't going to work. It's not going to work like this. I don't think it will work. So I am not going to require, I'm going to have the file inside. So why is it not going to work? We don't have time to explain. All right. Why I think it's not going to work. We don't have the time to explain that. All right. Or even experiment if it will work or not. We don't have the time. Because of our champions that want us to speed up. All right. DB. So what we want to do now with this DB is when somebody makes a request, I'm going to check if, I just write if else. We can do if, all right, but there's a more excellent way. But let's just do this. So rest dot end, right? We want to send a JSON response. So do JSON dot stringify. All right, and then we would say not found. So that's like our last result. So let's first write rest dot write head. Okay. Forward. So here we say message not found. Right? We can even do yeah, I know. So we can even do something first. So we can just say error, right? True. So we just say error true. Error true, right? And then what am I doing? So yeah, and then we could now try to handle other things. So let's check if this is correct. Key value. All right. So here we're going to say if request or URL is equal to, let's take care of the home route first. Is equal to just / and the request dot method is equal to get, right? We want to respond with 200, which although it's going to be the default, but let's just make it explicit, right? So do this and then paste here. I want to respond with message data fetched successfully. Okay, that's our message, and then we want the data to be our DB. Okay, so we could spread if we want, or we could return that to the user. All right, so there's no more error, and let's test what we've done to see if it works. So I'm going to reduce this window, and we could, let's go. So I'm using Thunder client, right? So if we go back to get, if we try to do put, we're going to get 404. All right, error is a true message not found. Okay, and if we try to do a get, we're going to get our data, all right, returned back to us. All right, so we've successfully handled a get route and then returned proper data to the user. All right, so let's see. I think I'm going to build a front end for this app so that we can consume from the front end. That you get a feel of how your front end users use your API. All right. So that when you're having conversations with them, for those who don't have front end experience, you will not sound as if you don't understand what they're trying to say. Like you can relate to what they're trying to say because you have seen us consume the endpoint. All right. And these are things that take time for a class. All right. So I've handled that. But I feel strongly that I personally would prefer using switch statements instead of if statements. So it's a personal preference. All right, but you can do that yourself if you want. So how can we make this file better? How can we make this file better? All right, how can we make this file better? We can make it better by doing something that we learned, all right? So you write functions for different functionalities. So we say get jokes. So write a function to get jokes, right? And then we say request response. It will accept request and response, right? And then what we want to do is do this. Okay. Want to do this. All right. So what we do is we're gonna say and say if then says so get jokes and then yes. So let's save and see if this will still work. So if I send, you see that it still works. All right, but now we have made it cleaner. Okay, so you see that it now looks cleaner. All right, so that is it. We could even make these conditions separate. All right, so I could create a file and then have all my conditions there, and then just use my conditions as variables. So you think, right? When you write your code, you optimize it. When you write your code, you optimize it. When you write your code, you optimize it. Okay. So we have optimized for that. We want to do the next thing, update joke. All right. So we want to update a joke. How do we do? So we're going to make use of the patch to update. All right. So we'd say else if, right, you are trying to patch. Else if you hit, so let's do rec.url, right, equals equals so let's so this is going to be interesting. We're trying to patch, so we're going to do something different. So we're going to get rec.url, right, and if it is equal to, so how do we undo this now? So let's try if method is equal to patch, right? ATCH like this. What we want to do is we're going to check for something, right? So we'll say rec.url equals to /jokes, right? But then the the method is patch, right? What we want to do is we want to update joke. All right. So we'll pass the request to the response update joke. So you can mute your mic, please. All right. And then we'll write our update joke function. Okay. So our update joke function is going to take that request. So I want to get the params. All right. I want to get the params from the URL. Okay. So something like this. URL jokes. Let's just say 1. Let's just do it very static for now. Let's just say 1. All right. And then what I'll do here is that come here and say const id is equal to rec.url. All right. And I want to split it using slash. And then I want to take the second guy. So let's try and see what happens here. So first I'm going to just return res dot end. All right, JSON dot stringify. Okay, I'm going to say ID. Okay, so let's see how that works for us. So if somebody tries to visit jokes1, all right, and then using the patch method, we will call this function. And what happens in that function? In that function, we get the URL, we know it's a string, but we want to split it. All right. So the URL does split. So I forgot that part of it. All right. So we split it using the URL. So what that means is that when you see a slash, you split. So in this case, we're going to get jokes and we're going to get 1. Okay. So I'm taking the second guy from. Let's just see how it works. So I'm going to do slash jokes slash 1, then patch. All right. So let's patch. And let's do slash jokes slash 1. So if I send, you see that we get jokes. All right. And that's not what we actually need. We actually need 2. But to show you what's happening for those who are really thinking about what's happening, let's just do it like this so that you see what's happening. If I make the request again, I'm going to get first empty. That's for like the first slash. Second slash gives me jokes. Then the other slash gives me, that's before the first slash, right? After the first slash, we have jokes. Then after jokes, we have 1. We check our URL, all right? So what I'm looking for is actually 2. Okay, so if we go back here and I just get 2, which is the third item, I should be getting the ID. So if I make my request again, I now have the ID. All right, but we know that we want to convert that ID to a number, all right, something with a plus. Okay, so if we make that call again, it's now a number. All right, and if you did not get this part of the code, well, that's just a unary operator that converts a string to a number. All right, so there you go. So I take the URL and I split it. Split works with strings. The URL is a string, so I split it. And this will return an array. And then I know that the second, which is the second index of that array, would be the ID. Okay, so I make use of the ID. So now what I want to do is we do not just want to give them the ID, right? We want to actually change something in our array, right? So what we're going to do is we're going to find that book. So we're going to find that book. What's the time? So we're going to find that book and we're going to update the information. Okay. So this brings us to something called rec.body. So rec.body. All right. So let's console the log rec. This is going to be a long one. So let's do fresh All right. So if I come here now and add body, so you see body, right? We're going to add the body and say ID is, this has to be JSON. So I say ID is 1. Now I'll put the ID here, but then I want to say, let's look at our jokes. What's the format of our jokes? Let's just copy one of them. Because you need to use the same format, right? So I'm going to make this a valid JSON. I'll remove the ID, all right? And then you see it's correct, so I can format it. All right, so now I want to update the first joke, and I want to change it. I want to change the comedian of the joke to John Doe 2. All right, John Doe the second. And I'll get rid of this and also get rid of this. All right, but now we're not updating yet. We just want to see the body. Okay, so if we make our call, all right, let's see. Make our call, we're supposed to, are we logging the body? Yeah, we're console logging the body. So why is it giving us undefined? That's interesting. Why is it giving us undefined? So somebody help me look if you can see it before I do. If you can see it before I do, that would, okay. So I think this body, I'm mixing this thing up with, I'm mixing it up with how, what is it called now? With how Express works, all right? Because it's been a while since I dealt with HTTP directly. So I think this is going to be it's going to be it's going to come in as a buffer. So let me check something. Just hold on. So I'm going to say rec.on data is an event emitter. So I'm going to take the current data, which we'll call chunk. Current chunk of data. Then I'm going to console the log it. Okay, so let's try again. So when do you use it? So this is a buffer. So you see that this is a buffer, right? And then what happens is that the body comes in streams, all right? So we're going to have a chunk. It doesn't come in at once. This is something that Express handles for you. You see that I was already going for JSON.body, request.body, because that's how Express handles it. Very easy that you won't know that a lot of complexities are going on behind the scene. Okay, but now let's explore what's actually happening. So what we can do is that we can get a variable, right? And just make it an array. Okay. So what we do now is that we're listening for an event on the request. So when the user makes the request, right? The request is going to come to us in chunks. That body is going to come to us in chunks, no matter how small the body data is. All right. So what I want to do now is to listen for those data. So when the data comes in, right, what I want to do is to push that chunk into the body. So I'm going to do body.push. So I push the chunk in the body. Okay. And then I also want to listen for when it has finished reading the data. So at the end, right? So rec.on, sorry, end, right? At the end of that whole process, what do I want to do? Okay, let me console log the, so I'm trying to shift this bar, but we'll leave it there. All right. So at the end of everything, what do I want to do? Let me just console the log body. Okay, so I can see what's happening. All right, so you see what we have here, buffer 2b, blah 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 7d. So let's make the call again. Make the call again. You see that we get our array of buffers. How do I move this guy? Okay, so you see that we get our array of buffers. So I've added all the buffers. In this case, it went just one. The trip was just one trip. All right, so we put the buffer in the array. All right, and then I console log it. So how do we make this something readable, something that we can make use of? All right. So I can use a method called concat, all right, to add all the buffers together, and then I can then use the toString method. All right, so we're gonna do it like this. We're gonna say so let's get a variable. Let's say converted buffer, all right, is equal to buffer dot. So buffer dot concat, all right. Now I want to concat the body, okay, and then convert it to toString. Okay, so let's console log converted buffer now to see if we're making progress. So if I send my request, you see that I get this. So I now have my object, okay? But just to be sure, I'm going to convert it to JSON because sometimes there might be, like JSON would not allow this last, what's it called now? Trailing comma. Most times I get errors because of that. So I would want to be sure, and I will call this JSON response, all right? Or result. That will mean result. So I'll say JSON dot pass. All right. Converted buffer. Okay, so now let's log the JSON format. So JSON res. So we'll make the call again. So we have an error undefined. So let's see what's there. What's the problem? So the problem is this leading trail. So you see that, do you see? So I didn't even know it was already causing problems for me. So if I run, sorry, I need to restart my server. All right, so npm starts. So if I run this again, you see that it now works well because that's valid JSON. So you see the reason why, but because of experience, I knew that convert it to JSON just to be sure that, you know, it's a proper JSON response. All right. So that is it. So now I can, you know, I can make the updates to my database. All right. So what I could do here is simply get the ID. So where's the ID now? This ID, right? How did you get the ID? Okay. So I'm gonna bring the ID upward. Let's put the ID here because I need you now. And so what I'm gonna do is take, let's say const updated DB equals I want to write some code now. So let's do db.filter or db.map. Okay. So I'm going to map now and say I'm going to say, should I map or should I find? Should I map or should I find? So let's simply do this, right? I know that we could do a lot of stuff, but let's just do this. So I'm going to get the item, right? The current item in the iteration. And then we're going to check each object in the DB, right? And if we see an object that has the same ID that was passed to us, all right? We're going to update that object. So that's what I want to do. Okay, so we're going to say if item.id is equal to ID, which is our ID, right? We want to take item. So we'll take the item, all right? But then we would spread body into it. So we'll spread, so return, by returning that object, we'll spread body into it. Okay, so let's see what happens. So if I console log updated DB, let's see what would happen. Okay, so if I save and do this, so we see updated John Doe 2. So I'm still having a buffer. Why are we still having a buffer? Let me check. Item and body. So let's check item and see. So I'm supposed to be using JSON response for my, instead of body, I'm supposed to be using JSON. So this is the converted version, right? So let's try it again. So if I send, you see that we have John Doe 2 has been updated. Okay, so what we'll do is we say else return item, or no need for else, just say return item. And now if I call again, you will see that we get all our data, but the ones with ID 1, right, has been changed to John Doe 2. If you check the original data that I had, all right, you will see that it was just John Doe. But after our update operation, we changed comedian to what? John Doe 2, right? You will now see from the response that we had that it was changed to John Doe 2, all right? So the last step that we need to make is to now update this DB. So how do we update DB? All right. So what we could do is, let's come back here. So db.map returns a new update. So what we can do is we could change this to let, so that we can do some changes, right? And then I'm tweaking a few rules, but I think it makes sense. So I'm doing db equals update db, huh? And if we console, if we return, let's return the db. So let's return the entire db as a response. Okay, I hope there's no error. Yep. So if we return the data, I'm seeing that John Doe did not change. So why did it not change? So let's see. It's supposed to change to John Doe 2, right? Let's call it again. So John Doe 2. All right, so you see that our update is actually working. All right. So I could bring, yep. So our update is actually working, all right? So there's a better way to write the code. Some of you might be saying that, oh, we could have done this, could have done this. So there's a better way to write the code. But then we are achieving what we set out to achieve, all right, to make updates to our database. Okay, so that was a lot to take in, I know, but it is what it is. You know, as we go deeper, there are some things that you cannot shy away from. You need to learn them, you know, the way you're seeing it. So I'm going to take questions now and end the class at this point. I will not promise you, I'm done promising that I would record and send, but if you see a recording, fine. I'm going to try my best to do, but it's not a promise because I know that my schedule can change very rapidly. All right. So I'm going to give you guys an assignment. You will see it on the LMS. all right? And it's going to have to do with posting, that's adding a new data to your database, to this database, and also deleting, that means deleting a record from the database. All right, that's what the assignment is going to be about. So you have this video, it gives you basic understanding. So you should know that when you want to add, you use post as your method. When you want to delete, you use delete as your method. All right. And then you can follow exactly how I did my own, endpoints, and you can use that to do yours. All right. So it's time for assignment. Sometimes I'm going to be getting up to 2 assignments per week. It might be difficult for some, it might be not difficult for others, but it's not to punish anybody. It's so that we all have a practical experience, with all these things. So by the time we're done with this, and we start doing Express, I think we're going to start Express next week. You will see how simple Express will be for you. It will be so easy because you have gone through this hard route and you appreciate what's happening with Express. And I think from Express moving forward, we are going to now move in a fast pace, in a faster pace, because there's not much that needs to be said again, except instead of using local databases, we'll connect the external databases and then use some external packages, and I think we should be done with the training. All right, guys. Thank you for your time. Let me just get 1 or 2 questions before I leave. Yeah, I also too.
Hello, Ramati.
Yeah.
You used stringify a lot, stringify method. What does it really do?
It converts a JavaScript object to a JSON object. That's what it does.
Okay, why exactly do we need to do
Because,
that?
yeah, you need to do that because JSON and JavaScript are different formats. So when you stringify, right, you are sending JSON format. If you try to send JavaScript directly, you might get an error in some cases because a valid JavaScript is not a valid JSON, but a valid JSON is a valid JavaScript. All right. So if you try to send JSON, there are some formats of JavaScript that you can send, and you will get away with it, and it feels like, oh, this thing works like that. But there are some JSON, there are some JavaScript objects that when you try to send, it won't work. So it's now like you cannot predict when it will work or where it wouldn't work. So the best thing to do is to convert it to JSON, and if it would not convert, it will fail during your development. Do you understand? So it will fail, and then you can resolve what the problem is. But if you just keep sending JavaScript directly, you might have some errors that you never thought would come up. All right, so that's it.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
Hi, please, I want to ask you a question. Okay, I was watching one of the videos last night, and the part where you wrote that there was like what did I guess of the one that was const maths equals to require, then in the bracket dot / maths, then console.log maths. But then when I tried to check the terminal, right, the node server.js, it kept like sending an error. But the thing is that every other thing worked, like the FS, the which one again? Yeah, the FS and the rest of them worked. But when when I was trying to do the maths, it kept throwing me an error.
Okay, so I am not able to say. So what will happen is reach out to me on Slack. Okay, reach out to me on Slack and maybe just send your code. Send the JSON. There's a way to send codes on Slack, right? Don't just paste it as text. Use the plus sign and then use snippets and send it to me as a file. So you send. So this is only for simple codes like this, right? So that you don't send me loads of Java to
Okay.
look at. So send the file, the module that you're trying to import, and the module where you're trying to import it into. Just send those two for me, and I'll be able to tell what's wrong.
All right, thank you. I'll send that now.
Yes, L for London. I'll call him now.
All right, guys.
I have a question, please. I would want to
Okay.
know why is there a difference between using for sending the response between using rest.end and rest.json, like having to just convert to JSON right away with rest.json rather than having to do rest.end and
Okay, so these things have versions, right? I am not sure if HTTP supports REST.json out of the box. I'm not sure. Esther, you're writing on the screen. I'm not sure if it supports it out of the box. I know that Express supports REST.json. All right, so you might be confusing, like I did somewhere along the line in video. I confused Express syntax for the core HTTP syntax. So if HTTP supports .json, you can use it directly, right? But I'm not sure it does. I don't know if it, so you can confirm that, all right? If it does, you can do it directly. You send your JSON directly. But if it doesn't, that's why we're using rest.end. Okay.
all right, thank you very much.
No, you're welcome. So guys, I think this is where I would have to.
Hello, please let me ask one question, please.
All right, quickly.
Okay, good afternoon. So I want to ask if you're initializing the server, will dash y work? Because I've used dash y and it worked, but you said dash y.
Okay, if it works, then that's fine, because there are different syntaxes. You can, when you're programming, you can achieve one thing in different ways. All right, so if
Okay.
it works, then you're good. Yeah.
Okay. Thank you.
All right, guys, thank you for your time. I would try to follow up to ensure that the video is uploaded, in time. Okay. Thank you so much, guys. Have a nice day, everybody.